Hey guys, tonight we're slipping off our sandals and stepping into the warm, musky twilight of ancient Egypt. There's harp music playing softly somewhere nearby, golden lamps flickering in rhythm with the Nile's gentle breath. And the air? It smells, oddly floral. Not because of the actual flowers, mind you, though there are a few marigold garlands here and there, but because of something melting slowly on top of your wig. Yep. You're wearing a cone of perfume. It's probably sliding down your hair right now. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're feeling friendly, drop your location and local time in the comments. I always love seeing where, and when, you're watching. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're a guest, maybe even an honored one, at a lavish banquet in Thebes. The stars are beginning to blink into the indigo sky, and the limestone courtyards are warm from a day's sun. Someone offers you beer in a clay cup. It's frothy and thick, with the flavor of sour barley and maybe, just maybe, the hint of sandalwood from the fingers that passed it to you. Across the courtyard, laughter rises. A group of noblemen sit cross-legged on woven mats, a platter of grilled duck and pomegranates between them. Their heads glisten under elaborate wigs. Atop those wigs? Strange white cones, just like yours. You reach up instinctively, fingertips brushing warm wax, softening but not dripping yet. It smells like honey and blue lotus. Your host told you it's custom. You're not sure if it's melting more on your left ear than your right, but you're trying not to overthink it. You sit back against the cushion, trying to play it cool. A young servant, he looks about 12, pours water over your hands from a painted vessel shaped like a lion. Nearby, a cat slinks between the legs of a musician tuning a harp. Somewhere in the back of your mind, you remember reading that ancient Egyptians worshipped cats. But tonight, it's clear, cats run the party. It's not a rager, exactly. Egyptian banquets were slow affairs. You drink, yes, and eat until your belt felt tight, but the real indulgence was in the senses. There's a woman fanning the room rhythmically with a fan made of ostrich feathers. The movement stirs the air, pushing waves of scent from a smoking censer across the courtyard. Frankincense, and something spicy you can't name. Not all of it is pleasant. There's sweat, of course. There's the occasional whiff of duck fat. But overall, you're floating in a perfumed cloud of deeply orchestrated smell. And here's the weird thing, you kind of like it. Historians still argue whether the melting cones were purely ceremonial or meant to actually mask body odor. After all, Egypt was hot. Wigs were popular, not just as fashion, but as practical solutions to lice and sunburned scalps. Under those wigs you'd sweat. A lot. So the idea of placing something fragrant, wax mixed with resins, oils, and flower essences, on top made a certain kind of sticky sense. Imagine it, you're halfway through your third duck skewer, and suddenly your wax cone starts to melt. A trickle runs down your braided hair, over your temple, down your neck. It smells divine. Your seatmate glances at you approvingly. Or maybe that's amusement. Either way, the melting cone is doing its job, keeping you fragrant, and apparently, fashionable. One cheeky wall painting even shows a party guest passed out, wine jug still in hand, cone slipping off his head like a poorly scooped gelato. Ancient Egyptians, sophisticated in scent, sloppy in drink. Back to your night. The stars are now thick overhead. The Nile breeze picks up just enough to cool the sweat under your collar. You hear a sistrum rattle, a sacred rattle, used in temple ceremonies, but tonight? It's just another part of the entertainment. A dancer enters, swaying in rhythm, perfumed herself with rose oil. You wonder if she's wearing a cone too. If so, it hasn't fallen off yet. Impressive. A noblewoman next to you asks if you want more beer. Her voice is low, her hair intricately braided under a heavy wig. Her cone, shaped like a lotus bud, glistens in the torchlight. She leans in and says something about how the best cones are made with imported myrrh. From Punt, she adds. Very exclusive. You nod solemnly, as if you totally know where Punt is. You don't. Few people do. It might have been in modern-day Eritrea or Somalia, or it might not have existed at all. As the evening stretches on, the party becomes dreamlike. There's no music now, just the chirp of night insects and the occasional splash from a servant refilling a water basin. The scent of your cone has changed. It's subtler now, more resinous. A bit smoky. A friend once described it as temple meets dessert cart. You don't disagree. And somewhere in all this, maybe in the smell, maybe in the slowness of the scene, you begin to feel something ancient stir beneath the surface. This isn't just about partying. This is ritual. This is social glue. This is scent as identity. You lie back on the cushion, eyes half closed, cone fully melted now. You've survived your first perfumed Egyptian feast. Barely. You wake up with a small, fragrant stain on your pillow. The perfumed cone, remember that lovely lotus-shaped thing, has run its course. Your wig survived the night, though slightly askew, and your linen robe smells faintly of honey and crushed flowers. No one tells you this, but welcome, you've just completed your first initiation into the strange, scented world of ancient Egyptian hospitality. Now it's time to rewind a bit and figure out what exactly is a perfumed cone. You pluck the soft wax from your wig and examine what's left of it. The texture is smooth, like thick salve, and you can still pick out a few stray petals clinging to it. Maybe blue lotus, maybe something local and lesser known. Historians still argue whether these cones were carefully sculpted from fat mixed with aromatics, or if they were simply hollow molds filled with essential oils and beeswax. What's clear is that they were designed to melt slowly under the heat of the body, releasing fragrance in waves throughout the evening. You glance over at a wall painting from a nearby tomb chapel. There they are again, those strange cones perched atop the wigs of women and men alike, perfectly balanced, like creamy dessert dollops. Most scholars agree these weren't just artistic symbols. They were representations of a very real, very fragrant cultural practice. Although, of course, not everyone's convinced. Some argue they were symbolic only, a painter's shorthand for, "This person smells delightful." Others say, no, real cones, real wigs, real melting mess. You try to imagine the logistics. Balancing a cone while dancing. Keeping your cone in place during a passionate recitation of poetry. Not flinching when your friend's cone accidentally drips on your dinner. It's all oddly delightful and also a bit absurd. Exactly what makes ancient history so perfectly sleep-worthy. Now, if you're wondering what these cones were made of, well, we've got guesses. No actual perfumed cone has been discovered intact. Not one. But recently, archaeologists in Amarna uncovered residue on wigs buried in elite tombs, chemical traces of fatty acids, resins, and perfume compounds that match ancient recipes. From this, they've reconstructed plausible mixtures, tallow or animal fat blended with frankincense, myrrh, cinnamon, and floral essences like lily or blue lotus. The results? Surprisingly modern. If you squint, you might call it early Egyptian hair mousse. A very, very aromatic one. One fringe theory suggests that the cones served not only as perfume but also as cooling devices, melting wax releasing moisture to keep the head cool under those hefty wigs. Sounds dreamy, until you imagine hot wax trickling down your temple mid-feast. Less cooling, more candle gone rogue. In some papyri, perfumed cones are referred to in rituals, not just parties. One passage describes temple dancers anointing their heads with cones before performing in front of the gods. The scent, then, wasn't only for the enjoyment of humans, but a kind of offering, a vaporous connection to the divine. You wonder, could the gods be soothed by smell? If so, you're basically a walking olfactory gift. The elite weren't the only ones who wanted to smell heavenly either. In lower-class households, people would make simpler versions of these cones, less myrrh, more crushed herbs, maybe even animal fat from the family kitchen. Imagine making your own deodorant using goat tallow and rosemary picked by the Nile. A little messy. A little funky. Still, in the absence of modern shampoo, not the worst idea. You visit the workshop of a cone maker in Memphis. She's crouched over a low table, pressing fragrant wax into lotus-shaped molds. The smell is eye-watering: raw cinnamon bark, mashed calamus root, and a hint of that peculiar fishy smell wax tends to get in the sun. She offers you a sniff, then winces. "This batch is for funerals," she mutters, as though that explains the weird after-smell. It kind of does. Perfume cones were seasonal, too. Certain flowers only bloomed at specific times, so cones in spring had very different scent profiles than those in fall. One favorite was the sweet, almost fruity smell of mandrake, believed to have mystical properties. Another was henna, used not only in perfumes but to dye wigs a rich auburn tone. You picture yourself adjusting your henna-dyed wig while the melting cone makes you smell like a summer orchard. Not bad, honestly. Some scholars propose that the cones also served a psychological purpose. In a society where scent was associated with purity, moral order, and divine favor, to be perfumed was to be approved, by your peers and by the gods. To stink? That was social and spiritual failure. You weren't just unpleasant, you were suspect. Which leads you to a fun little paradox. These cones, so frivolous at first glance, were actually deeply symbolic. In a civilization that linked smell to morality, and cleanliness to cosmic harmony, scent became more than a personal quirk. It was your identity. Your public scent profile. Your invisible social resume. Imagine today's world working that way. Job interviews based on how you smell after 30 minutes in the sun. First dates rated by your personal mandrake blend. "Sorry, I'm just not into his resin notes." You smile at the idea. Then yawn. You lean back into a linen pillow as the imaginary scent of lotus and cinnamon drifts through your thoughts. The wax is gone. The feast is over. But your curiosity is just starting to melt, slowly, like a cone under a Theban moon. You stir gently, as if the scent of cinnamon still lingers in your dream. But now, let's take a moment to zoom out, to wander, half-lidded and sandal shuffling, into the broader world that birthed these fragrant rituals. After all, the cone is just one piece of the puzzle. To really understand why ancient Egyptians smeared perfume on their heads like dessert toppings, you need to understand their whole obsession with scent, status, and cosmic harmony. You blink up at a painted ceiling. Stars float overhead, painted in perfect five-pointed symmetry. The air, thick with incense smoke, clings to your nostrils and softens your breath. Welcome to Thebes, sometime during the reign of Hatshepsut, one of Egypt's few female pharaohs, and a lover of gardens, trade expeditions, and delightful-smelling things. Hatshepsut was so into perfume that she organized an entire voyage to the mythical land of Punt just to fetch more myrrh trees. Imagine that level of commitment, sending a full royal fleet down the Red Sea just so your temple can smell a bit spicier. Historians still argue whether Punt was located in present-day Eritrea, Somalia, or somewhere even more remote, but wherever it was, they had the goods, exotic resins, rare woods, and baskets of powdered aromatics you couldn't get in Egypt. You climb aboard one of her ships, don't worry, it's a dream memory, so there's no seasickness, and walk past cargo holds filled with potted saplings. Myrrh trees brought back alive to be planted in temple gardens. Hatshepsut wasn't just importing scent, she was importing source. A living perfume library. Some of those trees reportedly thrived in her temple at Darobari, scenting the air as priests and dancers walked by. Imagine a royal monument that doubles as a botanical garden. Instagrammable, if Egypt had phones. Back in your own perfume timeline, you start noticing how connected scent is to every part of Egyptian life. Religious rituals? Frankincense and kifi. Courtship? Blue lotus and musk. Mourning? Cedarwood and cypress. Every emotion, every occasion, seems to have had its corresponding bouquet. Scent wasn't just added flair, it was the soundtrack to every event, played through the nose. You're ushered now into the quarters of a temple perfume maker, a kind of holy apothecary. She's surrounded by ceramic jars labeled in hieratic script, each with a different ingredient: honey, raisins, wine-soaked herbs, powdered iris root, and something she calls sacred tar. She begins the long, slow chant that always accompanies kifi preparation. The recipe takes days, sometimes weeks, to perfect. Scholars still argue about its exact proportions, but most agree on this: It was meant to be more than pleasant. It was supposed to be transcendental. Smelling Kiffy was, in theory, a shortcut to divine dreams. You try a little, smeared on the inside of your wrist. It's rich and heady, with a smoky finish that lingers like the echo of a flute. You instantly forget whatever you were worried about 10 seconds ago. That's part of the charm. Of course, not everyone in Egypt had access to this kind of luxury. Perfumes were expensive. Cones were time-consuming. But here's the twist. Even the working class found ways to get in on the olfactory action. A farmer might press crushed marjoram into a bit of animal fat and dab it behind his ears. A washerwoman might boil rosemary and pour the infusion over her linens. DIY fragrance wasn't just modern, it's been around since the Bronze Age. One delightful oddity in the historical record is a letter from a young scribe complaining that the girl he likes smells of burnt onions. You pause on that detail. Was that a dig at her diet? Or her lack of cone etiquette? Historians still argue, and frankly, so can you. Perfume was also deeply gendered, but not in the way modern deodorant aisles would suggest. Men wore cones. Women wore cones. Priests, dancers, soldiers, everyone had their own blend. The real distinction wasn't gender, it was role. Priests might anoint themselves with holy oils that mirrored the god's own mythic scents. Laborers? They favored simpler stuff, sharp, earthy tones that didn't wilt in the heat. Speaking of heat, you're sweating a little under your wig now. Ancient Egypt was hot. That's probably why they shaved their heads, then wore wigs on top, and then put melting cones on the wigs. A trinity of dedication. Somehow it worked. A sweaty head was unthinkable. A perfumed, waxed one was divine. In one cheeky relief carving, a noble woman leans in to whisper something to her friend. Both are mid-dance. Both are clearly giggling. And both have thick, melting cones perched like dollops of icing. You can't help but laugh softly. Some things never change. Parties, gossip, and a bit of hair product that tries to do too much at once. Eventually, you return to your own villa courtyard, still lightly drowsy from all that resin and ritual. Someone brings you wine, flavored with cinnamon and dates, and a bowl of pomegranate seeds. The air smells of river wind and sweet almond. Your cone has melted into a fragrant crown along your hairline. And though you don't know it yet, your scent has already started to tell a story. You're reclining now, just enough to keep the wine from spilling, but deeply enough to feel your muscles let go. It's late afternoon in ancient Thebes, and the sunlight has that syrupy quality that makes shadows stretch and minds wander. You're not quite ready to sleep, but the breeze says you're not far off. And as the cone on your head continues its lazy melt, you begin to notice something. Everyone here smells incredible. Not in the overwhelming way perfume shops sometimes hit you in the face. This is gentler. Like warm bread from a distance, or wood smoke far upstream. You begin to realize the perfumed cone isn't just about smelling good. It's about etiquette, intimacy, and, dare we say, seduction. Let's talk romance. Because perfume in ancient Egypt wasn't a finishing touch, it was a social signal. You stroll through the central market, where fabric merchants shout prices and a boy is chasing a cat that's stolen a figure. There's a girl across the square, wearing a cone perched delicately atop her braided wig, eyes lined with malachite, and you can smell her from here. Not strongly. Just enough. A hint of lotus, maybe? Blue lotus, the one that's part flower, part mild narcotic, and wholly associated with flirtation. You approach. She pretends not to see you. Her scent says otherwise. In love poetry of the time, yes, they had that. Smell often comes up before looks. Her scent is more pleasing than oil of balm, one suitor writes. Another says, I follow her trail like a bee to nectar. You think of modern dating apps. They had none. Just cones. Imagine finding your soulmate by sniffing across a dance floor. Awkward? Possibly. Romantic? Somehow, yes. Of course, not every use of perfume was about pairing off. Sometimes it was about power. Priests used it to commune with gods. Pharaohs wore divine blends said to mirror the scent of Osiris himself. Certain ingredients, like myrrh, cinnamon, or the rare labdanum, were reserved for ritual spaces. If you wore those outside the temple, you weren't just smelling good. You were making a statement: I have access. And as you've probably gathered by now, access was everything in ancient Egypt. Now you're being ushered into a preparation room behind a temple. You can tell it's sacred by the hush that fills the air like fog. A priest dips a finger into a carved alabaster jar and gestures for you to do the same. You obey. The oil is dark and musky, sharp at first but mellowing on the skin. He nods approvingly. You've just anointed yourself with sacred scent, a blend reserved for offerings and afterlife rites. Congratulations. You're temporarily holy. Historians still argue whether these sacred oils were ever sold or strictly rationed, but there's evidence that black market copies existed, poor substitutes sold by roadside vendors. Imagine a knockoff Osiris blend called Eau de Eternal. You smile at the thought. Even then, capitalism finds a way. Back in your memory stroll, you follow a procession through town. Priests leading bulls with garlands around their horns, acolytes burning incense in golden braziers, musicians playing lutes in slow, repetitive chords. The scent from those cones is everywhere, wafting above the crowd in waves. And for the first time, you realize something else. These perfumes weren't designed just to mask sweat. They were designed to saturate time. That scent, that specific blend of melted cone and river breeze and distant cardamom, it would forever mark this moment in the minds of those present. Smell was their time capsule, their camera roll. 1 with years from now, and it would all come rushing back. And now you, time traveler, are part of that moment. Drifting in and out of wakefulness, following a trail of scent through linen-draped halls, banquet rooms, temple chambers. Each place its own invisible signature. That's the strange thing about ancient Egypt. They were obsessed with permanence. They built pyramids to last forever. But when it came to memory, they trusted perfume. Fleeting, sensual, utterly ephemeral. You're lying on a rooftop now, looking at stars that haven't changed in thousands of years. A servant brings another perfumed cone, this one laced with crushed rose petals and almond oil. You switch it out like changing a pillow. You sigh. The cone sizzles softly in the warm air, and for the briefest moment, it's like the sky leans down to listen. You think of modern perfumes, tiny bottles, sprayed wrists, airport duty-free counters. Efficient, yes. But this is immersive. Ritualistic. A slow drip spell you wear on your crown. It melts over hours, leaves behind a trace of waxy gloss, and turns your body into a low-burning altar. And somehow, even with all your logical thoughts, you find yourself utterly convinced you smell better now. Not just to others, to yourself. You blink slowly, still on that rooftop, lulled by the night and the soft warmth pooling at your temples from the melting cone. Somewhere below, a flute plays a minor tune, the kind that drifts upward like a lazy spiral of incense smoke. The party hasn't ended, it's just found a quieter gear. And as you lie there, you're reminded of something strange. These cones aren't just fashion or flirtation. They're medicine. Yes. Scent is therapy. You shift slightly, just enough to hear the cone squish a little as the wax gives way to body heat, releasing another layer of oil, this one sharper, tinged with something almost peppery. You weren't expecting to feel better, per se. But there it is. A vague clarity. Your head feels cooler, lighter. Turns out the Egyptians had been using aromatics medicinally long before anyone coined the term. Wellness. Frankincense for inflammation. Myrrh for toothaches. Mint and caraway to ease stomach cramps. They didn't always separate pleasure and health. To them, good smells could ward off both evil spirits and headaches. You think about your modern medicine cabinet, and how none of it smells like sandalwood. A missed opportunity, perhaps. The household apothecary in your host's villa is worth a visit. It's tucked behind the kitchen, and it smells like if your grandmother's spice drawer married an herbalist's dream journal. Here, you meet a sharply dressed woman, clearly in charge, who's stirring a thick paste into clay molds. Cones, she says, not looking up. For tomorrow's sunrise festival. With lavender. For the nerves. You nod, unsure whether to believe in lavender's calming powers or just surrender to the placebo. But she's already moved on, motioning to a shelf where rows of small amphory bear hand-painted glyphs. One is for headaches. Another, more complex, involves lion fat and date syrup. For vigor, she says with a knowing glance. You try not to blush. Now you're on your feet, following her into a garden courtyard. It's late, the moon casting long silver shadows over rows of medicinal herbs, basil, coriander, fenugreek. She snaps off a sprig of something green and tart, hands it to you. Smell this, she instructs. You do. It's strong. Clears the sinuses, she adds. You nod because she's right, and also because you're slightly afraid of her. In the best way. Historians still argue whether these home-based perfumeries were mostly women's domains or shared family enterprises, but the evidence leans feminine. Tomb paintings and market receipts show women not just applying scent but making it, designing blends, distilling resins, inventing formulas. You realize something. Scent in ancient Egypt wasn't just science or art. It was domestic knowledge. Passed down. Like stew recipes. Or bedtime stories. You return to the party eventually, the scent of herbal paste still clinging to your fingertips. Someone's brought out a platter of figs and honeyed bread, and you help yourself, noticing how each bite seems to intensify the perfume around you. Was that part of the plan? Possibly. Maybe it's the cone. Maybe it's the frankincense burning quietly in a corner brazier. Either way, it's working. Someone tells a joke. Something about a priest who confused cinnamon oil with temple glue. You laugh, mostly because you're a little drowsy and everything's funny now. The wax has slid further down the sides of your wig. You think, this is either luxurious or slightly gross, but in the dark, it feels comforting. Like warm candlelight for your scalp. Now you overhear someone talking about the 7 sacred scents. A myth? Possibly. Or maybe a lost perfumer's code. The speaker insists they were real. 7 smells used by royal healers to diagnose both body and soul. Lotus for grief. Henna for anger. Cinnamon for spiritual confusion. If you flinch when you smell it, she says, they knew what to treat. You consider whether you'd pass that test. You smell of all 7 right now, probably. A walking bouquet of ancient diagnostics. But instead of worry, you feel oddly reassured. It's like wearing a poem. Or walking around inside a spell. The moon has climbed higher. The music has thinned out. Someone is snoring nearby softly, rhythmically. You think about all the ancient nights like this, thousands of them, when people fell asleep with waxy hair and scented dreams. The cones melted then, too, and the stars were in the same places. You shift slightly, adjusting your head so the cooling wax trickles down a new path. It's soothing, almost maternal. You're not entirely sure how you'll get the stuff out of your hair tomorrow, but for now, that's future you's problem. Present you is drifting, again, and the scent of blue lotus is curling into your thoughts like a slow exhale. You're lying on a rooftop with a waxy cone of mystery slowly dissolving on your scalp. Yes, this is your life now. And as the perfumed oils seep down your temples like some ancient aromatherapeutic marinade, your thoughts float to logistics. Specifically, how in the name of RA did they make these things? The answer, as you're about to discover, is both wonderfully mundane and quietly ingenious. You rise and pad softly through the darkened hallways of the villa. The scent of myrrh follows you like a sleepy cat. Downstairs, past the storage jars and carved pillars, there's a workshop, a low, warm room lined with stone shelves and squat clay ovens. Here is where the magic happens. Or, depending on your expectations, where perfume meets practicality. The cones start as a base, animal fat, most commonly beef tallow or sometimes lanolin from sheep. It's not glamorous, no, but it's effective. The fat is cleaned and rendered down, then left to cool until it's the consistency of thick custard. Into this base, the perfumers mix resins and oils, frankincense, cedarwood, cinnamon bark, lotus flower extract. The combinations are as varied as cocktail menus at a trendy bar. Everyone has a secret blend. You approach a small copper pan bubbling over a flame. A young apprentice is stirring with an intensity usually reserved for alchemists or soup-obsessed grandmothers. The air smells incredible, like warm honey laced with spice and something sharp, maybe pine resin. When the mixture reaches the right viscosity, it's poured into cone-shaped molds carved from clay. These are smoothed, set, and cooled until firm enough to handle. Historians still argue whether these cones were hardened before parties or allowed to remain soft and melty from the get-go. Either way, the end goal was the same, a slow release scent that activated with body heat and gradually soaked into wig fibers or scalp. That's right, many Egyptians didn't just wear the cones on wigs. Some brave souls let the scented wax soak directly into their shaven heads. You shudder slightly. Brave indeed. You're handed a finished cone, still warm. It smells of juniper and almond. Try it, says the apprentice, grinning. Not like eat it, though. Please don't eat it. You don't. But you do press it gently to your palm. It gives slightly, pliable like softened soap. The thought crosses your mind that these would sell like crazy at a modern spa. Someone should get on that. There were dozens of types, categorized by occasion. Wedding cones with rose and coriander. Funeral cones scented with sacred kifi, a heady blend of over a dozen ingredients, including raisins, wine, and henna bark. And cones for the working class, too, less exotic, more affordable, often relying on locally grown herbs and reused fats. Even in fragrance, ancient Egypt had tiers. You pause by a set of shelves where failed experiments sit abandoned. One cone looks as though it tried to be fashionable and medicinal, and instead became lumpy and aggressively green. Another has separated, with the oil leaking out like it's trying to escape. You imagine the perfumer's frustration, centuries before the invention of synthetic stabilizers. Making a consistent cone was an art. And don't get started on seasonal ingredients. Crops failed. Trade shipments ran late. Resins were taxed. You wonder if ancient perfumers complained about deadlines, too. There's a scroll half unrolled on a table nearby. A recipe, it seems, annotated with smudgy fingerprints and what looks like oil stains. At the bottom, someone has doodled a tiny, smiling cone. You love them instantly. Then comes the twist you weren't expecting. Scent cones weren't just for parties and personal hygiene. Some temples used them in ceremonies to purify participants. In rare cases, worshippers would anoint statues with oil from the melted cones, believing the divine could smell and respond. That gives you pause. Imagine gods who judge based on fragrance. A bit like your Aunt Aaliyah who once refused to hug you because your cologne was aggressively lemon. You return upstairs as dawn begins to ghost the edges of the sky. The party's over, but the scent lingers, sweet and smoky, layered and complex. The melted cone has left a slight slickness in your hair, which you try to ignore. No one ever mentions that part. On your way to your sleeping mat, you pass a mirror-polished bronze plate. Your reflection is soft in the dim light, framed by the faint sheen of wax and the heavy-lidded look of someone gently marinated in centuries-old fragrance philosophy. You look, if you'll forgive yourself for saying it, deeply luxurious. Tomorrow, they say, is another festival. More cones. More recipes. Maybe even a new experimental blend made with, someone said this, and you're not sure they were joking, fermented ostrich egg. You sincerely hope that cone never makes it into mass production. You lie down, the scent wrapping around you like a weighted blanket. It's more than a party favor. It's history that melts and moves and perfumes the air you breathe. You think, people 1,000 years from now will burn incense and still try to recreate this smell. Some part of you, this version of you, this wax-drowsy, scent-soaked guest of ancient Egypt, might still drift through that future air. Just less waxy. You sleep deeply, and when you wake, it's to the sound of gentle birdsong and the low murmur of a reed flute somewhere in the courtyard. The air is warm and carries the last traces of night-blooming jasmine. A servant tiptoes past, balancing a platter of pomegranates and honey cakes, and you begin to realize something fundamental. Ancient Egyptians didn't just enjoy perfumed cones, they built entire rituals around the sensory world. This, dear dreamer, is where your journey next takes you, into the realm of rituals, where scent was far more than cosmetic. It was sacred, encoded, and sometimes weaponized in the pursuit of social harmony. Yes. Scent. As social glue. You trail your fingers along a painted wall as you move through the colonnaded hall. Scenes of offerings, parades, feasts, all of them glowing with color, each figure holding something small and smoking, incense pellets, bundles of herbs, fragrant unguents. There's a theme here. You're beginning to suspect Egyptians feared body odor the way modern people fear their phones dying. Historians still argue whether the average Egyptian truly bathed daily or if that's temple propaganda talking. But one thing's for sure, they want it to be seen as clean, sweet-smelling, and presentable to both gods and dinner guests. And the perfumed cone, odd as it seems today, fit neatly into that ethos. Back in the party chamber, attendants begin sweeping up the evidence of last night's revelry. Half-melted cones, wilted lotus petals, scattered almond shells. You spot a priest among them, carefully collecting the remains of ceremonial cones from a corner shrine. Those weren't party favors. They were offerings, burned as a way to feed the gods. It's said that Ra, the sun god, demanded myrrh in the morning and frankincense at noon. No word on what he liked for dinner, but you imagine something zesty. Now, follow me to the temple. It's mid-morning, and the sacred precinct hums with quiet movement. You're led through tall gates, your sandals brushing the sand-flecked limestone path. Priests greet you with nods, their shaved heads polished to a shine, their white linen robes crisp and spotless. They smell faintly of cassia and beeswax, another sign they've been using cones. But here, the cones are not for fun. They are tools of devotion. Inside the inner sanctum, the light changes. It filters in through high slits, golden and slow, catching particles of incense in the air. You're offered a cone, not one of your fruity party blends, but a dense, smoky composition, rich in henna, wine resin, and something sharp you can't quite place. It's heavier, earthier. Serious scent for serious prayers. You kneel beside a pool and watch as the priest presses his cone to his scalp before intoning a chant. The scent warms, releases, rises. It's mesmerizing. You realize that here, scent is not just personal, it's theatrical. It sets the mood, marks the sacred from the mundane, and helps guide the mind into altered states. Not altered like. Floaty and flirty. Altered like. Speak to the afterlife. Altered. The temple cat jumps into your lap, purring. You consider asking whether cats ever wore scent cones. Historians haven't found a definitive answer on that one. Maybe one day, someone will discover a relief of a smugly perfumed feline at a banquet table. It would explain so much. Outside, festival goers are arriving. You hear drums, tambourines, laughter. The temple's outer courtyard fills with people, merchants, farmers, dancers, children running with sticky fingers and hibiscus petals in their hair. You notice something. Almost all the adults are wearing scent cones. But not just any cones. These are shaped differently. Some have embossed patterns. A few are inlaid with powdered malachite or carnelian dust. Decoration wasn't just for jewelry, it seems. Even wax had a fashion cycle. One woman you pass has braided tiny dried flowers into the base of her cone. A man nearby has a cone dyed red with ochre and scented with cinnamon bark. Likely a bold choice meant to attract attention. You see a subtle social dance happening, status, personality, and mood all communicated silently in scent. Imagine walking into a crowded subway car and knowing instantly who's a morning person, who's wealthy, who's religious, and who probably shouldn't be approached until they've had coffee, all based on how their head smells. That's essentially what's happening here. The cones are nonverbal biographies melting in real time. You're handed a garland of sweetgrass and told to join the procession. The smell of the garland clashes a bit with your still lingering cone of almond and juniper from last night, but nobody seems to mind. The air is thick with competing perfumes, but somehow it works, like a slightly chaotic but lovable family reunion. At the center of the festival grounds, dancers move in time with slow, hypnotic drumbeats. Their movements send waves of scent through the crowd, trailing from their heads in visible wisps. You can't help but grin. Somewhere between sacred ritual and social flexing, these cones have found their niche. As the sun climbs high, the cones begin to sweat in earnest. Everyone's scent changes subtly. Some grow sweeter, others sharper, depending on the oils inside. You see a pair of nobles touch foreheads briefly, their cones squishing together like fragrant ice cream. It's weird. It's oddly romantic. You're not sure how to feel. Later, you sit under a fig tree and sip barley beer while watching the cones slowly drip into oblivion. The festival shows no sign of slowing. Drummers beat on. Priests chant. Someone passes by wearing a cone that smells distinctly of toasted bread, which might be an accident or an innovation. This, you think, is how scent becomes history. Not just through texts or scrolls, but through melted memories, soaked linen, and the faint trace of frankincense in the morning sun. The sun sinks low, casting long shadows over the festivity, and the scent cones have entered their final act, melting. You notice small beads of fragrant wax trickling down the necks and temples of the guests, glinting softly in the fading light. It's a slow, gentle decay that somehow feels peaceful rather than messy, like a candle's flame winding down at the end of a long, warm evening. You wander through the gathering, observing how people carefully catch the wax with thin strips of linen or leaves, a practical ritual you hadn't anticipated. Nobody likes a drippy party, after all. Some of these wax collectors are treasured keepsakes, imbued with the scent and memories of the event, ancient equivalents of a perfume sample or a souvenir ticket stub. Historians still argue whether the cones were ever reused after melting, or if each party called for fresh ones. The more practical among the scholars suspect that recycling was rare. The wax, soaked through with oils and resins, probably lost much of its charm after a night's wear. But it's intriguing to think that someone might have tried to salvage that lingering essence, a bit like holding on to the last drops of a fine wine. Nearby, a musician strums a harp, the delicate notes mingling with the soft hum of conversations and the rustling of linen. You find yourself lulled by the peaceful soundscape, realizing the cones are just one part of a larger sensory tapestry that includes music, touch, taste, and sight. A party in ancient Egypt wasn't just an event. It was an immersive experience, designed to soothe and enchant. As you sit beneath a canopy woven from palm fronds, your thoughts drift to how these scented cones connect us across millennia. They weren't just fleeting adornments. They were carefully crafted symbols of beauty, devotion, and social connection. You imagine the artisans who blended fats and fragrances, the priests who blessed them, the dancers who wore them like crowns. All contributing to a world where scent was as vital as language. You recall the debates about whether cones were purely aesthetic or had deeper spiritual significance. Some scholars argue they symbolize the wearer's purity and readiness to commune with the divine, while others see them simply as early aromatherapy, a way to relax and please the senses. Maybe you think they were both. The night deepens, and the party begins to wane. People start to gather their belongings, smoothing down their hair and carefully peeling off the remnants of their waxy crowns. The warm glow from oil lamps flickers, casting shadows that dance softly on the sandstone walls. You take a slow breath, savoring the last traces of fragrance in the air. It's a comforting mix of earth and spice, sweet and resinous, ancient and familiar. You realize that even as the cones disappear, their memory lingers, woven into the stories, the rituals, and the quiet moments between festivities. As the courtyard empties and the stars blink awake overhead, you feel a gentle contentment settle over you. The scented cones of ancient Egypt may have melted away, but their essence remains, a timeless reminder of humanity's endless quest to beautify, celebrate, and connect. You lie back on your mat, the soft rustle of palm leaves whispering above you. The fragrance fades slowly, like a lullaby sung by the past. And as your eyes close, you carry with you the gentle warmth of a party that never quite ends. You awaken to a different kind of morning, one scented not with party cones, but with the crisp, clean aroma of the Nile's early flow and freshly baked bread. Life in ancient Egypt wasn't just about celebrations. It was also about the daily rituals that shaped routine existence, and the role of scent played a subtler but no less important part. Picture yourself stepping barefoot onto cool stone floors, the scent of baked figs and honey mixing with the earthy smell of wet papyrus reeds nearby. You brush past women weaving baskets and men repairing fishing nets, all immersed in their ordinary yet rhythmically calming tasks. The wax cones are still part of this world, but now they serve a different purpose, practical, even therapeutic. Many Egyptians believed that smell could influence mood and health. Some wore perfumed cones to fend off unpleasant odors, not unlike your modern-day use of deodorant, though far more artistic. The cones often contained ingredients like myrrh, cinnamon, or even lotus extracts, each chosen for its supposed health benefits. Imagine feeling soothed by a gentle cinnamon breeze as you tend to morning chores, or uplifted by the hint of lotus while sharing a quiet moment with a child. Historians still argue whether scent cones were primarily a luxury or a widespread daily custom. The evidence is tantalizingly ambiguous. Tomb paintings depict nobles lavishly crowned in scented wax, but less is known about common folk. Maybe the cones were a social marker, reserved for certain classes or occasions. Or perhaps the scent was as essential as bread or beer to all. You stroll through a bustling market, where vendors hawk fragrant spices and herbal remedies. A woman offers you a sachet of dried lavender and mint, popular calming scents. Nearby, a healer mixes ointments that combine fragrant resins with crushed beetles. Yes, beetles, for medicinal purposes. You wrinkle your nose but trust the wisdom behind such recipes. After all, even Cleopatra was said to use unusual beauty treatments. As the day wears on, you witness the subtle interplay of scent and social roles. Priests favor frankincense cones during rituals. Merchants prefer sandalwood to signal wealth. Laborers might use simpler mixtures to mask the scent of hard work. Your own cone, if you were to wear one now, might speak volumes without a single word. Remember that bit about crocodile dung sunscreen? That's just one example of how ancient Egyptians embraced both practicality and ritual in their daily lives, blending the mundane with the mystical. Perfumed cones fit perfectly into this dance, a symbol of refinement wrapped in everyday necessity. You pause beside a pool reflecting the bright sun, the faint scent of honey and cedarwood drifting on the breeze. It's easy to see how scent, like water, could be both cleansing and sustaining. For the Egyptians, it wasn't just about smelling nice. It was a way to live well. The sun climbs higher, and you find yourself in a quiet garden, surrounded by the lush greenery of date palms and fragrant papyrus. Gardens in ancient Egypt were more than just pleasant spaces. They were carefully cultivated oases where plants served multiple purposes: food, medicine, and yes, scent. Imagine wandering through rows of basil, coriander, and marjoram, their aromas weaving gently through the air. The Egyptians took great pride in their gardens, often tending them with as much care as their sacred temples. Some gardens even had small pools designed to reflect sunlight, creating a shimmering effect that added to the peaceful atmosphere. This was a place where both body and soul could find respite. Perfumed cones, you realize, often included ingredients harvested from these gardens. Lotus flowers, with their delicate yet persistent fragrance, were a common additive. You brush your fingers over the soft petals, noticing how their scent is subtle but unmistakably calming. Historians still debate whether lotus essence was primarily symbolic or genuinely therapeutic, but either way, it was highly prized. You catch the faintest whiff of myrrh drifting from a nearby shrine, mingling with the natural scents of thyme and pine. These aromas weren't random. They were carefully selected for their spiritual significance. Myrrh was thought to purify and protect, while pine was believed to promote healing and vitality. It's as if the garden itself was an extension of the temple, a living altar to the gods. As you stroll further, you encounter a gardener pressing fragrant oils into small containers, a practice that might remind you of modern-day perfumers. These oils were then mixed with beeswax to create the cones you've come to know so well. This blending of nature's bounty into wearable art underscores the Egyptians' sophisticated understanding of scent. There's a light breeze, carrying the mingled perfumes of blooming jasmine and crushed cedar leaves. You pause to breathe deeply, feeling a moment of profound calm settle over you. This, you realize, is the heart of the scented cone tradition, a way to carry the garden's peace with you, even into the bustle of city life or the solemnity of a temple ritual. You think back to the parties and festivals, the sacred ceremonies and daily routines, and see how all these moments are connected by the gentle thread of scent, an invisible, comforting presence woven through ancient Egyptian life. The afternoon drifts lazily as you wander toward the Nile's edge, where fishermen pull in their nets and children play among the reeds. Here, the air carries a mix of fresh river water, sun-warmed mud, and subtly, the lingering hint of incense smoke from nearby temples. You're reminded once again how scent marks so many facets of Egyptian life, from the most sacred to the delightfully everyday. The perfumed cones, you realize, were part of this rich sensory world, an extension of the natural aromas surrounding the Nile and the cultivated plants in the gardens. Interestingly, some scholars suggest these cones had a practical purpose too, to keep away pesky insects like flies and mosquitoes, which were plentiful by the water's edge. The idea of wearing a slowly melting, fragrant wax cone to repel bugs feels both clever and charmingly inventive. As you observe a fisherman pulling in a wriggling catch, you note the steady rhythm of daily life, work balanced with moments of rest and ritual. Some historians still argue whether perfumed cones were common outside elite circles or if they trickled down to river communities like this one. The evidence is scarce, but you imagine the delight a fisherman's wife might have taken in fashioning a simple cone to freshen the home after a long day. Nearby, a group of children chase each other, their laughter mingling with the gentle splash of water and the distant call of a water bird. You notice one child with a small clay figurine scented with sweet resin, perhaps an early toy or talisman. It's a quiet reminder that scent was embedded not just in adults' lives but also in the play and imagination of children. You remember the story of how the cones were made, from blending fats with fragrant herbs to molding and cooling. The artisans who crafted these cones were like silent alchemists, transforming raw materials into something both beautiful and useful. Their work connected nature, craft, and social ritual in a seamless way. As the sun tilts toward the horizon, you breathe in the complex perfume of earth, water, and resin, feeling a gentle drowsiness beginning to settle. It's easy to see why the Egyptians treasured scent, not just as a luxury, but as a thread weaving their everyday lives into a sensory tapestry. You take a last look at the tranquil Nile scene, the sky turning a soft orange pink. The slow melting of wax, the soothing rustle of palm leaves, the distant murmur of water, all come together in a quiet, calming symphony. Evening deepens, and the city streets soften under the dim glow of oil lamps. You find yourself drawn toward a bustling household preparing for a small feast. The kitchen is alive with aromas, roasted figs, honey-drizzled bread, and fragrant herbs sizzling gently in clay pots. The air is thick with the warm, earthy smells of food, mingling effortlessly with the faint trace of perfumed cones melting slowly atop the heads of guests. It's in moments like these that you truly appreciate how scent was woven into Egyptian social life. The cones weren't just decorative. They acted as a gentle overlay to the entire sensory experience of dining and gathering. Imagine sitting around a low table, the soft crackle of firelight flickering on painted walls, while the subtle fragrance of myrrh and cinnamon lingers softly. Historians still debate how far these scented cones penetrated everyday life. Were they confined to the grand halls of the wealthy, or did simpler versions grace the heads of common folk during special occasions? You suspect the truth lies somewhere in between. Perhaps, as with many traditions, the cones began as elite adornments and gradually found their way into broader cultural use. Nearby, a servant carefully fans and scents smoke through the room, blending it with the melting wax to create a layered sensory ambience. The scent of incense, richer and more pungent than the cones, signals the sacred even in casual settings. You notice how each aroma plays a role: cones for personal fragrance, incense for space cleansing, and food aromas for nourishment and pleasure. You catch a glimpse of children giggling quietly in the corner, their heads adorned with small, playful versions of the cones, less formal, more whimsical. It's a light-hearted reminder that even ancient rituals could be sources of joy and amusement. As the evening wanes, the mingled scents weave a tapestry of memory and comfort. The cone's gentle melting mirrors the slow unwinding of the day, a sensory farewell that prepares everyone for rest. You lean back, letting the warmth of the fire and the fragrant atmosphere lull you closer to sleep, carried on a breeze of honey and cedar. Night deepens and the city quiets, but inside a richly decorated chamber, a ritual unfolds. You settle into the scene where priests and priestesses perform a ceremony honoring Hathor, goddess of love, music, and fragrant pleasures. The air is thick with sweet smoke from burning frankincense, mingling with the soft, melting scent of perfumed cones adorning the heads of all present. You can almost feel the slow, hypnotic rhythm of the chanting voices, the flicker of candlelight playing on elaborately painted walls. The cones, infused with lotus and myrrh, slowly drip their scented wax, casting a delicate aroma that weaves through the ceremonial space like a quiet river. It's a sensory dance designed to soothe the mind and spirit. Interestingly, historians still debate whether the wax cones were originally practical, keeping flies away during long ceremonies, or purely symbolic, representing the wearer's spiritual purity. The evidence is mixed, but both ideas highlight the cone's dual nature as both functional and ceremonial objects. In this ritual setting, the cones take on an added layer of meaning. They become a bridge between the physical and divine, a fragrant signal of devotion and respect. You imagine the priests carefully molding their cones each morning, knowing they would accompany them through sacred rites and moments of quiet reflection. Nearby, musicians pluck on harps, their notes gentle and unhurried. You notice how the scent, sound, and light combine to create a deeply immersive environment, one designed not just to impress, but to calm and center those present. As you listen to the slow unfolding of the ritual, the weight of modern life falls away. Here, in this scented sanctuary, time seems to stretch and soften, inviting you to drift gently toward rest. You catch the faintest smile on a young priestess's face, her eyes half closed as she surrenders to the calming power of the fragrant wax melting slowly down her forehead. The night stretches on, and you find yourself wandering through the quiet corridors of a grand Egyptian palace, where the faint glow of oil lamps casts long shadows on frescoed walls. Here, the scent of perfumed cones lingers like a whispered secret, soft, sweet, and persistent. The palace servants move silently, tending to the final preparations for the next day's celebrations. You notice that these cones are made from a richer blend of oils and resins, cedarwood, myrrh, and a hint of cinnamon, all carefully balanced to produce a fragrance that lasts through hours of wear. Imagine the delicate care that went into crafting each cone, as artisans experimented with recipes to perfect the slow melt and subtle aroma. Historians still puzzle over exactly how widely these cones were used. Were they primarily a symbol of status within the palace walls, or did common people imitate the practice with simpler versions? Some think the cones were a kind of fragrant armor against the often harsh realities of ancient life, a small luxury that transformed the wearer's experience. Walking past the throne room, you overhear a conversation about the cone's surprising effects beyond scent. Some believed the melting wax had healing properties for the skin, while others thought the aromatic smoke helped clear the mind and spirit. Whether true or not, these beliefs deepened the cone's significance. You pause to touch a carved stone relief showing a noble woman crowned with a wax cone, her eyes serene and content. It's easy to imagine how such a simple object could carry so much meaning, a mark of elegance, spirituality, and comfort. Outside, the night air is cool and quiet, the faint smell of lotus and cedar blending with the crisp desert breeze. You feel a gentle sense of connection across the centuries, linked by the soft melting of wax and the slow dance of scent. This quiet, fragrant world invites you to rest, to let the slow rhythms of ancient life lull you closer to sleep. The first light of dawn creeps softly across the horizon, casting a pale glow on the sandy streets and towering temples. You wander through the awakening city, where the faint scent of perfumed cones still lingers in the cool morning air. Though the cones have long melted away, their memory remains, a delicate trace woven into the fabric of daily life. As you reflect, you consider how this ancient practice, so simple yet so evocative, was more than just a cosmetic ritual. It was a sensory celebration of life's small pleasures, a gentle reminder that even in a world shaped by gods and kings, people sought comfort and beauty in scent. You remember the flickering candles, the slow melting of wax, the soft incense smoke, and the quiet hum of laughter at lively feasts. Each moment connected by the subtle, soothing aroma of those perfumed cones. Historians still debate the full extent of their use and symbolism, but what remains clear is their power to create calm and connection. Now, as the city stirs to life and the sounds of daily bustle begin, you feel a soft sense of closure. The ancient Egyptians, with their fragrant cones, offer you a final gift, a peaceful journey through scent and time. As you breathe deeply, the scent of lotus, cedar, and myrrh seems to fade gently into the morning light. Your eyelids grow heavy, the rhythm of the Nile and the soft crackle of the hearth lulling you ever closer to rest. Let yourself drift now, carried on a warm breeze of memory and calm, as the ancient world whispers its soothing farewell.